welcome to this Nayantha conversation with Sanjeev Bajaj. Sanjeev, it's a real pleasure to have you with us. We do these conversations as a part of the various residencies of the Navigating the World program. The first conversation was with Chris Gopal Krishnan, over a year ago. And I think we've now done about 15 conversations in total. Now, to talk about Sanjeev, everyone always says so-and-so needs no introduction and then gives a long introduction. I will not do that. I will only say that Sanjeev is one of our greatest industrialists. He comes from, of course, a wonderful heritage that we will talk about in a bit. He's built a terrific business. But Sanjeev has some very special qualities as an individual. He is the fastest responder on email of anyone I know. I mean, if you send him an email, and I don't know how many emails he gets a day, typically, I would say the average time for response is between 5 and 10 minutes. And it's very unusual. I've probably sent him a really irritating email if it takes more than an hour to get a reply. Second, he has an amazing ability to keep a really robust, rigorous calendar. And if you get on the calendar, then there's real sanctity to that meeting. It happens on time, and you do not need to in any way worry about whether or not, there'll be some change. This was a particularly amusing time when Sanjeev was the president of CI, because one of the things that you do not have is a predictable calendar. And I think it used to drive him nuts because it kept changing all the time. I see Shefali laughing about that. So, Sanjeev, thank you again for joining us. We will get started. The first question that we always like to start with is a question about background. And you grew up in Pune. You grew up, indeed, on the Bajaj Auto premises. The house that you lived in and grew up in was a very nice house, but on the Bajaj Auto site and premises. But in your case, growing up with your parents, your father was a very special person. He was a person who inspired many of us, who were a model for many of us. But I'm sure it also made growing up with a father like Rahul Bajaj, I'm sure it was difficult at times. I'm sure it was really enjoyable at times, but I'm absolutely certain it was really interesting. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about what it was like to grow up in Pune at that time and grow up with Rahul as your father?
So Naushad, first thanks for having me over here, and it's great to be here with all of you all. I hope you all are enjoying the program. Bajaj is one of the original sponsors, but not actively involved. So if there's something going wrong, definitely tell us. We'll hold Naushad and the rest of them accountable for it. When Naushad told me about this, for many reasons, I was happy to do it. Not least of them, given the long relationship between Naushad, Parad, and my own family, and my own personal relationship with Naushad over multiple decades now. Also because we are supporting Nayantha, and it's always interesting to meet a bunch of new people, and that's why I hope we get a bunch of questions as well. The secret to answering the emails back in record time, as you can guess, is I have no work. Coming to Naushad's question, we all grow up with our parents for various stages of our life, and we all have unique experiences. And I'm sure we would all have interesting stories to share. My father, as many of you would have seen him on TV, some of you may have met him or known him also, was very forthright, very frank, happy to discuss. If any of you all saw him on any TV or one of these TV programs on those panel discussions, he was happy to discuss any topic. Very well read, very combative, but very happy to hear the other point of view and to be able to discuss, argue it, or support it. For me, growing up, there were 3 stages, I would say, in my life. Till we were 18, we hardly ever saw my father. He was traveling, he was working. My mother brought us up. She was a strict disciplinarian, and we owe a lot of what we are and who we are to her. Once we went into college, my mother was no longer as strict a person earlier. So we saw the more friendly side of her. We could have a glass of wine with her. We could chat about various things with her. And my father started getting a little bit more involved in life. For him, his work, politics, larger economic issues is what he enjoyed as conversation. And because at that age we were a little better read, we could engage in those conversations with him. And then I would say once I joined work, let's say by the time we were 24, 25 or so, the relationship with both my parents became a lot more equal. There were clear guidelines on what you could do, what you could not do. And it used to be very simple. So my father used to tell us, these are the broad guidelines if you want to stay in my house. Otherwise, find another place to stay. So there was no fight or argument or anything about this. It was very simple. And I must say they were not stifling broad guidelines.
It's like being vegetarian. Like being vegetarian.
Like being vegetarian.
Yeah.
So I grew up vegetarian. By the time I was 17,
Yeah.
I started trying out various things. And we were very open, so they knew about it. But they said, home will be vegetarian. So broad things like that.
Yeah.
What was interesting with my father is every discussion with him was a combat. And as he would tell me, in the later part of his life, he and I both went to Harvard Business School. My daughter's just finished her first year there. What they teach you in Harvard is, for any situation, at any of the good MBA schools, through the case study method, for any situation, look at both sides of the picture before you make a decision. And think hard about the pros and cons on both sides, because then hopefully you will arrive at a more well thought out answer. And especially if we are working, we are in middle management, we are in senior management, we have to defend their point of view. So, if you just thought on one direction because you have this gut feel it is right, you can be caught in a very odd position in the meeting room when you say that, oh, I didn't think of these 3 other things. So this was in many ways what he enjoyed doing, but this was also his training, and not just with us, anybody in the room on any topic. And he used to laugh about it in the evening and saying that, yeah, I will always take the other point of view. And I will see, can you defend your point of view? Because if you have thought through well, eventually at some seniority, the senior managers, us as we grew through the organization, we had to take decisions and you had to execute like each one of you all. So that was his joy, but that was also the way he prepared us. The other was hard work. He worked longer than any one of us ever did. And he used to get to work in his early years by 10 o'clock or so. He was not an early riser, but never came home before 8:39. Later years, that 10 became 11, 11:30. Still came back home at 8 because my kids had grown by then. They were staying together. They used to call him up and say, Dada, we're going to have dinner now. So he used to come home. Worked very hard. And, in the smallest of things. I remember once I must have been 16, 17, and my brother and I, we had gone out, came back in the night about 11, 11:30 or so. And maybe I was 18, 19, I was in college. And our room was right opposite my parents' room. And we heard a little bit of noise. And I was inquisitive. So I just went and put my ear to the door and I could hear him singing something. I thought he was gone crazy or something. So the next day he left for Mumbai. And in the evening, I asked my mother, I said that, what was he singing? She said he has gone for his school, Cathedral Schools, I think, 125th reunion, and he was rememorizing their school anthem, the school song, so that he could, without a paper, sing it in front of everybody. So even the smallest of things for him to have done his work right was very important. And in meetings, you had to be thoroughly prepared because you could be sure he had read every line of the note you sent in. He had marked it, and he was prepared to argue. And a lot of what we learn not from what our elders tell us, but we learn from their action. Humility. As much as on TV he was out there, he could appear very forceful. Some people used to take it as arrogance. At the same time, I know that outside our factory, there's a small Gujarati restaurant called Mayur. And we used to go once a month for a nice Gujarati thali. And one day we finished eating early. So when we came out, the driver was still not there with the car. So and these were days without mobile phones. We were wondering, what do we do? So one of us went into the restaurant to call home and tell them to send a car. Somebody else went out looking for the driver on the street. Before we knew it, he had called a rickshaw and jumped into the rickshaw. And he said, "Chalo, we'll go home and get the other car." So the rest of us were waiting for our car. And this person, of course, he very proudly started talking. And the rickshaw driver was floored when he realized that Rahul Bajaj was sitting in the rickshaw.
In his Bajaj.
In his own rickshaw. But he was also very simple in his life. And these were things that you pick up. Of course, each generation evolves. I'm nowhere as simple as him. And I do things my own way. But you pick up stuff from people that you work with, you experience, you see what they do.
I remember in Delhi, Rahul could have had any car that he chose, but he consciously had a Skoda in Delhi because I remember him saying to me once, he says that, he was in the Rajya Sabha at that time, and he said, I didn't want to show up at the Rajya Sabha in a fancy car. And it was just this, it was who he was. It was who he was. I also remember, what you're saying about the detail. I remember we once co-hosted a CI National Council dinner, and we went through the menu. So he said, you decide the non-vegetarian items. He was very clear that you should have 2 of these and 2 of these and so on. And then we decided the alcohol that would be served. And it was just wonderful. He says you need one single malt, 1 blend. You don't need more than that. There was this just wonderful level of detail that he applied to everything. I think he's the only person I know who was simultaneously a master of both detail and big picture.
Yes.
And he could sort of effortlessly loop back and forth. Yeah.
True, very true.
Yeah. So you started in Bajaj Auto, and then at some point in time, you built, in fact, the international business of Bajaj Auto. And then at some point in time, you made this shift to Bajaj Finance and what later became the Finserv group. And, Finserv is now, I don't know what the market cap is. Do you even keep track? I think it's...
Once in a while.
Yeah, so I think it's about
10 or
5 trillion rupees. So it's like...
So Finserv, Bajaj Finance and Housing Finance together would be 10 or 11 lakh crore. Yeah.
10 or 11 lakh crores. Now, so that's, if you want to work out the numbers, that's about 4% of GDP. Yeah, roughly. Yeah. So it's this huge group. And Sanjeev, you've always credited Nanu Pamnani and Rajiv Jain with building out this really successful cross-cutting business. But you've played the key role in it all the way through. I think you should talk about your role in building this huge business.
See, firstly, it's been a very interesting journey and an unbelievable journey for any one of us. None of us could have thought in 15, 16 years to get to the size we have. And it's a reflection of the India opportunity. It's a reflection of the great team we have. And yes, it's a reflection of the combination of a gentleman called Nanu Pamnani, who was our mentor. He was a career city banker with tremendous experience and capability, of people like Rajiv Jain, who runs Bajaj Finance, or Tapan Singhal, who runs a general insurance company, and my role. And this this triage, or the three musketeers, the CEO, Nanu, and me, as we looked at it many years later, we realized that in serendipity, it had worked out really well. Because Nanu was this grey-haired North Star. He had done everything in the banking space, especially. And he was our mentor. He was our guide. He was
And he was the most fantastic audit committee chairman, I think.
And he was also very detailed, very process-oriented.
Yeah.
So he helped us institutionalize the business. He helped us build the business, knowing that he was there if we went too far in taking risk. And he had to pull us back. People like Rajiv, Tapan are great leaders who have built our companies as though it's their own. And my role came in. See, I was very clear. I'm an engineer. I did my MBA, worked 10 years in Bajaj Auto. 2007, when I moved to financial services, the one thing I knew was that I knew nothing about financial services. But I knew that as India was growing, and these were the years of 8.5%, 9% GDP growth, I realized that financial services would have a very important position in India in the future. And we had Bajaj Auto Finance, which is a small financier of our own motorcycles. We had these two insurance companies, which we had started with Allianz a few years ago. So luckily, there was a head start that we could build these businesses. And I was very clear that we had the opportunity to be the financial services life cycle partner to every Indian. Which meant across your financial services life cycle, from your early age, when you need a loan with your first job, you would need one for your car, you need one for your home. Two, as you start buying more assets, you need asset protection for your car, for your home, for your health, for your factory, for those of you who have small businesses. And then, as you start saving some money, you need saving opportunities, whether mutual funds or other kinds of products. So it was in our mind that can we create a set of businesses over the next decade and a half, and that's what we have done now, so that we play a relevant role in each important stage of the financial planning of an individual, of small business. We knew that there was no point chasing a Godrej or a Tata or a Birla to give them a loan, because there were enough of the big banks. What was our competitive capability? But we could build competitive capability with the individual, with the small business, because those segments were neglected by the big banks. And that's how we got started. I was also very aware of the fact that if I wanted to run one of those businesses, maybe I could learn my way, make a bunch of mistakes, and as CEO run that. But I had the bigger opportunity to build out each of those businesses. So from being in a line function in Bajaj Auto, where I built the exports business for 4 years, I now had the role like the producer of a movie. I had to cast it, I had to help build the story, which is the strategy. I had to make sure that the financials were in place and everything else. And that's really been the journey which worked very well, because then we were not stepping on each other's toes. Instead, we were there to leverage and support each other between the CEOs, between the mentor, and between my own role. And it of course has worked out beyond our wildest dreams.
You know, to give you just one number, which I think is one of the most impressive numbers, I think Bajaj Finance has 120 million customers.
Will be biased. We have about 105 million active customers right
120
now.
million.
120 by year end.
Yeah. So, you know, it's a good number to think of if you think of the percentage of households in the country.
So we today, between all our businesses, end up serving 1 in 3 households in India. And our aim in the next 10 years is to get into every household.
Is there a Bajaj way of doing business? You know, I feel very privileged to be part of both the finance and auto boards. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that everyone would talk about was how different auto and finance are and how they run and so on. I have to say, my general sense is that I see more similarities than differences. And there are certain basic ways of running the business that are I think very fundamental to both sides of the business. I wonder if you could talk, is there a Bajaj way? There seems to be a Bajaj way of doing business, even if it's not written down or articulated or even spoken about.
So the Bajaj way of doing business, firstly, as you're saying, is an informal, unwritten way. There's nothing on paper. It's what we've imbibed growing up. It's what we've seen in our early years. It's about doing business, one, with the highest levels of integrity. And every large group will tell you that, right? Which group is going to tell you that, no, you can do business without integrity? But when those decisions come, when you can either move ahead by taking a small exception one time, saying, next time नहीं करेंगे, इस बार मेरा target है, महीने का target है या quarter का target है, or my boss is pressurizing me is to meet his quarterly P&L, you stretch yourself. Not because the money is going into your pocket, but because you have to meet your targets. Most of us work in public companies, but knowing to say no from the top down, and for people, not necessarily at the front level, but middle level and above, to feel confident that they can say no. The culture you built in the organization becomes very important. And if you make an exception for yourself at the first time, people start making exceptions as well. So we, if you see, have very consciously not got into businesses which in the times of license Raj required licenses, which means you have to pay to get those licenses. Or if you did not pay your CEO, you were telling him to build a business with one hand behind their back because everybody else was paying. So we decided, let's stay in consumer businesses. We will fight and compete in the marketplace with the rest. But we stay as far away from the government as possible. And even today, that's what we do. So that's a conscious choice. As a group, other than Bajaj Finance, Housing Finance, which by nature borrows money and lends money, otherwise for 30 years we are zero debt. All other companies are zero debt.
And it used to really bother your father.
With us taking debt in Bajaj Finance, yes. Yeah. So we've had enough politicians who are friends of the family who over the years have told us, set up a steel plant, set up a power plant, especially in the 90s and the early 2000s. When some of the big boys, double A's weren't around, they needed others to do that. But we were always clear that no, we'd rather sleep well at night and not get into anything which requires us to compromise on integrity. So that's something that is very well ingrained. Second, there is no substitute for hard work. Third, stay humble. So these, I would say...
I think also a willingness to invest.
And yes, focus on improvement, whether small improvements on the shop floor, whether change. So don't rest on your laurels of the past. For us, the excitement is in the journey, not the destination. So, and building that excitement to your teams is also very important. Now, taking on some of these informal values, in the last 10 years, across our FinServ companies, we have created a set of cultural anchors. And so our basic cultural anchors are rooted in one simple ethos, which we call as the founder's ethos, or the ethos of an entrepreneur. I've always felt fortunate that when I started running exports at Bajaj Auto, then moved to financial services, coming from the promoter family, within a broad set of boundary limits that the board set, I could go and build the business as I wanted to. And that's why when we started building financial services, I was very keen that we build a culture where our other leaders will feel the same. Now, your sales guy at the front end of the store may not feel that, but at least senior middle management and above, which in our case is 1,000 people, should feel that way. And we have hence anchored our culture around how do you feel like an entrepreneur? How do you feel like a founder? Is the environment around you, the tools that we provide you every day at work, helping you to realize your dreams every day? So that when you get out of bed, you get out of the sprint in your step to come to work, not to say that, oh, I have to be at work from 9 to 5 because I need a paycheck. Around that, there are a few pillars then. So the first one is focused on building long-term, sustainable, profitable businesses. And each of these words is important. Long-term, because eventually, if you have to build long-term businesses, it has to come with certain capability. And it has a second message in that, and we talk about this in our companies, is there will be times when in your own work, you will have a chance to make a short-term gain in market share, in revenue, in profit. As long as that does not detract from where your long-term direction is as a firm, that's fine. Take that. But if it takes you away, you must have the courage to say, no, I will stick to that path that we have decided. So that's first. Second, when I moved from the motorcycle business to financial services, and I've said this a few times, in the motorcycle business, our sport motorcycle, the Pulsar, you could start the engine, and the roar of the engine is something that most customers were willing to pay 10% more for. I could never get a roar out of an insurance policy or a loan document. So, because financial services, you're in a very commoditized business. If you're going to be at the commoditized end of the business, effectively customer is only going to look at pricing, discount, and you have no capability difference. So we said our second pillar has to be disruptive innovation for customer benefit. How do we bring capabilities where the customer experience with us is significantly superior compared to our peers for the customer to come to me? So very simple. In 2007, if you needed a loan to buy a television or a washing machine or a mobile phone, either you pay, so if you had cash, you paid cash. Very few credit cards existed. And if you're a middle class customer, even if you had a credit card, you had a limit of 20,000 rupees. You kept that more for emergencies end of the month. So you took a loan. You went, you saw, and it was typically middle class. It was a family buying experience on a Saturday evening, with your wife or husband with one or two kids. You went to Das Electronics or Vijay Stores or one of these. At that time, the big ones had just started coming, like the Tata Chromas and the Reliance. And you like this nice 32-inch plasma TV. And the guy said, "Ki acha loan chahiye, fill up your documents, and I'll let you know in 3-4 days." Because the next day, so he gave it to the bank. Then the bank gave it to a runner boy who went to your society. He said, "अच्छा ये यहाँ रहते हैं क्या? बर्ताव कैसा है? रात को कितने बजे आते हैं घर?" Because he was building a risk profile for that individual. Then he came back and said, I filled up the form, this all is okay. That went to the head office. And third day, you got your loan or you were told, nahi, loan nahi milega. We said, this is such a dirty process. Why can't we change the experience where we can actually tell that family that before you get home in the next couple of hours, we'll let you know if your loan is approved. And not only that, by evening, we'll install the TV with Tata Sky in your house so that you can watch a movie together in the evening or watch cricket. By then, CIBIL, our first credit bureau in the country, had about 30 million customers. And as we checked on that data, which most banks were not even bothering to check, we realized that in the top 20, 30 cities, nearly 50% of customers were in CIBIL. Because if you took a loan, if you had a card, you were reporting to CIBIL. We then said that, okay, we have to spread this business around the country. We were very small. Bajaj Finance had a 20 crore profit in 2007. Did about 10,000 loans a month. We said that, we need to variabilize our costs. And we went to this American company called Salesforce. They were the first CRM cloud-based company. And we said, we want to convert your CRM platform into an online cloud-enabled loan origination platform. And over 18 months, we worked with them. We co-own global IPRs on that. And we've done a lot of innovation since then with them. And we rejigged our own loan processing technology, internal technology processes. In 18 months, we went from 3-day loan approvals to 3-hour loan approvals. Now there was a reason for the customer to come to us. So this was innovation, disruptive innovation, but something that makes a difference to the customer. Thereafter, another 2 years, we went to 3-minute loan approvals, and for the last 10 years, it is instantaneous. It's 30-second approvals. We went from 10,000 loans a month to now doing 160,000 loans a day. This year we do about 50 million loans. So innovation for customers was second very important. Third is what I call as accountable empowerment. I've always believed that people, if they have the right attitude, they are the best to do the jobs that you give to them. You don't want to move decision making up. You empower them, you give them all the necessary tools, and you hold them accountable. So we never, when we build our annual budgets, we never go and tell our leaders, say if somebody running X line versus Y line versus Z line, we don't go and tell them that you have to grow 15% next year or 20% next year, or that you have to add these 3 products, or you have to cut that product. They and their teams go work on their plans. Actually, what we do is we institutionalize this process quite well mid-year. And I was in that in the last couple of days with Bajaj Finance. Each of our companies spends 6 to 8 weeks in multiple small groups, and over a 3-4 day period for each of the large companies and 1 day for the small company with me, they go through their plans for the next 5 years. What are the big projects they want to take up? What are the things which are not working they want to rejig? What are initiatives we took up, they are not scaling, we are not finding competitive advantage, so we have to shut them down. And we put a 5-year plan with reasonably robust financials, because the whole idea is that in 5 years, you can achieve anything you want. So it gives them the ability to dream big and to dream far. And then thereafter, by February or so, the first year out of that gets a lot more fine-tuned, which becomes a budget for the next year. And that's where the accountable empowerment comes in. And then we hold monthly reviews to hold them accountable to what they've done. We also understand that the market keeps changing. So if they are not able to meet their budgets, or if they've done something different, as long as they have done their homework, they can answer the change well, that's fine. The institutionalized review process, which I just talked about, is the 4th pillar. And our 5th pillar is always do the right thing. The honesty, the integrity part of it. Now, we went a few levels below this. Once we created these pillars with our teams, we said, what kind of mindsets do we want to inculcate in our young leaders, especially from the time they're in their late 20s? And what are the behaviors which we can give as examples for them to understand what those mindsets mean? So we actually, it's there on our website or on our investor deck as well. So we have a culture wheel which has got all these. And so this is now hard-coded. And at the same time, it is more principle-based. It is not prescriptive. And every 3 years, we refresh it. Plus, what our companies will do is they pick up from this overall what is of more critical importance for them the next few years and evolve, because they are different sizes, their competitive market situation is different. So none of this is rigid. It's not meant to hold you back. It's meant to enable you to move ahead. So I would say that's what drives our businesses.
Thanks. Thank you, Sanjeev. Nice. So going beyond business, and my friend Mare is here, and one of our founders, and one of the things that her husband tells her all the time and tells me all the time as well is that we have the inability to say no to things. Yeah. And we just get into too many different things, and then we regret it later on. Now, your father was involved in many, many things beyond business, beyond the Bajaj Group. You were also involved in a fair number of things. Your father is the only person who's ever been president of CI twice. You've been president of CI, I've been president of CI. And I know I struggle with saying no, as does Mare. And what do you say yes to and what do you say no to? How do you decide? This is to help both of us, especially. How do you decide what to say yes and no to, and then you can even tell us how to say no.
So till 5 years ago, my life was very simple, very inward looking, just focused on building our businesses. Everything I else external. My father did. I consciously chose, even with financial services, to stay in Pune, build the businesses in Pune. All our companies are headquartered in Pune. A lot of people told me at that time, you should be in Mumbai. That's the heart of financial services. How will you get people to come to Pune? And my answer was simple. I said that yes, it will be challenging in the initial years, but in a country of 1 billion people, I need a few thousand people, so we'll manage. And I'm glad we did that because it allowed us to stay focused on our work, away from the noise of Mumbai. It allowed our companies and our leaders to work with each other, because end of the evening, if you finished early, before you went home, you had a drink with each other. There was nobody else to go with. And that has helped us leverage each other a lot. We routinely move people around, not only within our companies, but between our companies as well. And so for me, till 5 years ago, work was just building these out. After that, as my father started slowing down, I realized that it was important to build an external role as well. That's where my involvement with CII increased. And what I enjoyed with CII was the breadth of what I got exposed to. See, all of us in our lives are, of course, hopefully very aware of what happens in our own business, in our own sector. Maybe you have the bandwidth to, skim through the papers and read through what's happening in politics and a few other sectors. Something that are a hobby. Somebody may spend time on photography, on health and other things. But that 1 year of CI basically, and as you know that, Naushad, exposes you to all of India, every sector, working with politicians, working with global leaders, working fast, taking quick decisions. And that's why you can only do it for 1 year. But it was tremendous exposure. So, from the steel sector to chemicals, to healthcare, to Bollywood and movies, you understand those a lot more. So that exposure was great. What I do now is I focus, other than, of course, financial services, I do need to spend some time with the regulator, with the government. We work on policies, not just for ourselves, what we think is right for India. I was in Delhi last 2 days. I was in Delhi last week. I don't like going to Delhi, but what to do? So you need to do that. I find that I enjoy meeting people where you can get into meaningful conversations around technology, around health. We do health insurance, we lend to health businesses, we have a whole health business, we have a digital health platform, which today in 150 cities has aggregated 130,000 doctor clinics, 15,000 hospitals. We process through that 3 million insurance claims a month. But health is something that interests me, because I believe that as we all get older, a lot of our normal problems are lifestyle issues, nutrition issues, exercise issues, sleep issues, breathing issues. It's not the popping a pill to solve a problem. That's okay if you have an acute problem. So I enjoy reading that. That's more I would say, a personal hobby. So I spend time then in these areas, because there's only so much time that you have to spend.
So a last question before we open it up to everyone. And then we have right at the end the Nayantha question, which is around reading, actually, which you just mentioned. We'll come back to that. So, you've been working now for around 30 years. And if you could relive the last 30 years, what would you do more of? What would you do less of? What would you do that would be quite different? Or would you do the same?
So let me just quickly relive
How?
30 years. Yeah, this is work related. So my first stint was between my engineering and my MBA on the shop floor of Bajaj Auto, where what was enjoyable was to see theory getting converted into practice. And that helped settle a whole lot of concepts in my mind. You understood how a factory worked. After my MBA, I spent 5 years in Bajaj Auto in finance, costing, and that gave me very reasonable grounding. I was not an expert in financial services, but gave me reasonable grounding on the finance side of the business. The admin team used to report to me at one time. And again, my father used to say that, all of us get excited about the fun parts of the business, the R&D, the product, the marketing and sales, the branding. But the boring parts of the business are equally important because many of them form the core of the business. And if you don't spend time there and you don't show serious interest there, how do you expect other people to do that? So those years were more a grounding on the finance side. And so that was the second stint. The third stint is as a line function when I ran exports. And that was a very exciting stint for me because I did not have direct responsibility for a business outcome till then. And I remember 2004 when I took over exports for Bajaj Auto, we exported in the previous years about 80,000 vehicles a year. And a lot of it was to Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, a little bit to Colombia, a little bit to Egypt. We also had fringe exports to the US, Australia, Iran, where we weren't doing that. It was more a nuisance. And I created beachheads in Latin America, in the Middle East, and then in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, those were important markets. So these were all existing regions, and put just one member sales team there saying, your job is to represent the partner, not us. Tell us what are their problems. Our job is to solve it for you. So the approach changed in the company. Otherwise, it was always company was the distributor. That you have to sell this. These are my terms of credit. This is the negotiation on price, and then the rest is left to you. Whereas we now became a partner to our partners. I shut down the US, changed the distributor in Iran, set up a unit in Indonesia, and basically elevated our involvement with our partners, converted, fine-tuned our products for their requirements while still not fiddling with what was core, the engine and the basic look and feel. And I remember, so we were doing, as I said, 8,000 vehicles a month. And before I took on exports, my father told me, he said, see, so far you're at the back. You don't have a line road. He said, I'm very happy that you want to take this challenge on. But keep in mind, now success or failure will directly be attributable to you. He says, I'm here to help you succeed. But if you fail, you're not behind anybody, so you will fail. And I used to say, that's fine, don't worry about it. I was also young at that time. That was 2004, so I was 34, 35. And then, 8-9 months later, and my father and I, after dinner, very often used to walk in the courtyard for 20 minutes. So typical style, trying to be a parent, but also trying to push me, say that, people in the company are saying that you're still doing only 12,000 vehicles a month. 20,000 to hona chahiye. Nahi to, failure is yours. And my mother used to tell me later, don't feel bad, your father is only encouraging you. And I used to tell her, don't worry, I'm not feeling bad. I know what I'm doing and I know what he's doing as a father. And I told him, I said that I'm laying the foundations for the future. If I don't put our teams there, I used to travel 15 days a month very often, and not more than one night in the same city, once sometime Latin America, every 6 weeks in Indonesia, then the Middle East, go to Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and very often wake up in the middle of the night and take 5 seconds to realize where I was. So then again 6 weeks later, we are still 12,000-13,000 vehicles a month. Spare parts bhi grow nahi kar rahe hai. I don't want to demotivate you. So, and I used to laugh. I used to tell him what all we are doing. Next year we did 240,000 vehicles. The year after that 440,000 vehicles. And the year that I moved, 625,000 vehicles. We took spare parts in 4 years from 10 crores to 100 crores. And the team thereafter has done even much better. But that 4 years for me was the most exciting years of my life, that third phase of my work. Because with my team, we were able to drive significant change in the company. Even today, if you talk to anybody from those times, Bajaj Auto, they know this team changed the entire export focus. Bajaj Auto now for the last 8-10 years, nearly 50% of its sales is exported to 100 countries around the world. But the seeds were sown at that time. So that was, I would say, in many ways, my most exciting phase. That also gave me the confidence to go and build financial services. And as I said, with Nanu support, that of people like Rajiv and Tapan. So I don't think I would ask for anything different, because in hindsight, each of those phases really propelled me for the next phase. And all happened without planning.
So what irritates you? And what gives you pleasure? And then
Thank God you're not asking my wife this question. Otherwise,
I can ask her what irritates her.
So, see, what I enjoy doing, I've realized over a period of time, from a work point of view, is building businesses. I enjoy innovation that's creative.
Beyond work.
Beyond work. Okay, so that's a work. Outside of work, I enjoy spending time with a small group of friends. Once in a while, we don't do it as much as we should, but I'll jump over. I stay across the road. So I'll come over, or Naushad would come over. As you said, we're not doing it enough. Have a drink. But get into an engaging conversation. And you very much enjoy spending time like that with a small group of friends and family. I enjoy watching movies. We do that almost every second weekend. We'll either watch a serial at length or watch a movie. I enjoy traveling, but not the hectic work-related traveling, more leisurely traveling. And I actually would enjoy going to like Goa for 3 days and just relaxing. For me, that's a good thing to do.
Thanks. Okay. So,
and you said what irritates.
What irritates you? Yes.
So, as you talked about CI, what irritates me is when things are unplanned.
Yes, I know.
Now, if you're on holiday, that's fine.
Yeah.
But because my work schedule is very organized and for a very long period of time, that gets disrupted because it disturbs my thoughts, the thinking that I've been doing for various things. So that irritates me. It irritates me seeing our traffic. How much last 10 years, 15 years we are trying through insurance, telling the corporation, we will put in money, improve the traffic, but you have to ensure discipline, because we can't ensure discipline. So our traffic irritates me. It irritates me when people keep their houses clean but keep the outside dirty. You see people throwing things out of their car. Because we talk about our dirty cities. We are responsible for our dirty cities. And it's so simple to keep it clean. And it irritates me when people are discourteous and are not on time. 99% of the time, I'm on time for meetings. Because I respect the other person, irrespective of how senior or junior they are. They're making time, they're prepared. So, people who don't respect time, I get irritated with.
That's a good list. Yeah. Okay. Come. Questions.
Hi, I am Behul, working with Force Marshal closely with Marsha. So, as you cited, you've seen your father in TV, fascinating debates, and he would really jump out, as you say. And now we are seeing your version. And to me, the contrast is so striking. So what are the inspirations you took which are very close to you and which you want to like fight it out? And what are the things that you feel that something which your next generation also should take forward from a value standpoint?
So Mehul, to what you started off with, that with the kind of outspoken extrovert that my father was, whether my mother, my brother, my sister, me, we were all the quiet type. Only one person can be like that in the family. But as far as the value systems come, as I would say, humility, simplicity, as relevant generation to generation, it evolves. Um, I remember I like my fancy shoes. My father's shoes used to come from Prabhat stores in Mahabaleshwar. And I remember once 10 years ago, Shifali, you'll remember we were in Europe with him and his shoes had torn. So we said, Chalo, we'll buy you a pair of shoes. My uncle Neeraj was also there. And we took him into a Todd's shoe store. He had never been into a Todd store. And he saw this pair of loafers. He liked it. He said, okay, we'll buy this. So he said, okay, we started going to pay for it. He said, but how much is it? He said, no, don't worry about it. He said, no, how much is it? And it was €350. He stormed out of that store and didn't talk to us for the next 1 hour. He says, you people are actually buying shoes at this price? Because he realized we are all wearing similar shoes. So simplicity, humility, integrity, both of thought and action. These were the important things that we learned. What we also learned in that simplicity was his ability to talk at ease with the driver, with the watchman, to the Prime Minister of the President of the country. If you wanted to indulge him in an interesting conversation, he was happy to do that. So often when we used to stay in Nakudi, we used to go to the cinema over there. And it was the Ad Lab's big cinema. And routinely youngsters used to stop him for a photograph, for a selfie, to have a quick conversation. And we used to get irritated with it. We used to see the movie, we wanted to come back home. And he used to be merrily talking to them, chatting. So he was happy to do that. I can't say we've taken a lot of those good values from him, but some hopefully we've taken, our children have taken. We went to a school near our factory, run by Swiss convents, but a SSC school, St. Ursula. And when I grew up later on, his secretaries used to tell me that every year he had admission available for us in the top schools, in top 1 or 2 schools in Mumbai. But he and my mother were very clear that if we had to live in India and grow in India, then we must grow up in the real India. And Shifali and I did the same with our kids. They went to a sister school, which we set up there, run by the same convent called the Bajaj School. So some of these values come from what we inculcated from our parents.
So it's about speaking frankly and forthrightly as your father really did. And I remember when your father passed away, Harsh Goenka had I think the best comment, right? His comment was, Indian industry has lost its spine. And which I thought was a really insightful little comment. So where did he get that courage from?
So it came from what he saw of his father and his grandfather. So his grandfather, Jamnalalji, who we credit to being the founder of the group on the business side, and we'll complete 100 years next year, himself spent years in British jail fighting for independence. Gandhiji used to treat him as his fifth son, as his adopted son. And last 10 years of Gandhiji, he moved to Varda, and we set up an ashram for him called Sevagram, where he spent his last 10 years before he passed away. And my great-grandfather himself was very vocal in doing what he thought was right. He gave up the Rai Bahadur recognition that the British had endowed on him when he joined the Quit India movement. We have a temple in our courtyard, a rather large temple in Varda, Harinarayan Temple. In 1928, see, the temples, if you were Dalits, you were not allowed to enter the temple. So Gandhiji one day was there and he said, Arey, temples mein Dalits are not allowed. How is this correct? So God is there for everyone. So my great-grandfather decided to open the temple to Dalits. And the entire Marwadi community said, we will boycott you because this is against what we do. And he said, it doesn't matter. This is the right thing to do. And opened the temple. So our temple was the first temple in the country to open to Dalits. Then I know from letters between him and my great-grandmother who was also a Padma Vibhushan, he was once in jail. So she wrote a letter to him saying that, you're going to be in jail for a while. How do I use my time? So he replies back saying that, you must occupy your time in whatever manner you feel is appropriate. But there is a leper colony nearby. They always need help. Why don't you go and help over there? And she writes back saying that, I'm willing to do whatever you tell me to do. And leprosy in those days was thought to be contagious. She said, but really you want me to go and expose myself in a leper family, a leper colony? And he replies back, and imagine this is a man replying to a woman in those years in the 1930s. And he tells her that I would never tell you what to do. It is your decision. Whatever you do, I will be happy with. But I told you what would please me the most, because they are the most needy. And she, right from then in the 30s till a few years before she died in the 70s, till she got really old, used to work in that leper colony at least for a few hours a day or a few hours a week after that. So there was a lot of, I would say, strength that came. So in our Marwadi community, she was the first woman to move around outside without a gungat. That was not allowed. So breaking down a lot of these old rules. So courage probably came into the genes. Then his son, my grandfather Kamal Nayan ji, was a member of parliament, the first three parliaments, very close to the Nehru family because you fought the freedom struggle. He and Indira ji were similar age. When she started nationalizing the companies, he told her that he would leave the party because he said, this is wrong. You can't take over private sector. And she said, how can you leave the party? You're family. You're like family. And he said, I will continue to be like family, but I cannot support this decision. And he left the party. I remember in the 80s when we used to have a waiting list because the government would not give us, you needed a license to produce more scooters and three-wheelers. We had a 12-year waiting list for vehicles, and said the joke is to be when you had a child, you first went and
you booked a telephone and a Bajaj.
You booked a telephone or maybe a Godrej covered and a Bajaj scooter. So he started in 84, I think, producing beyond the capacity. So at that time, the MRTP commission called him. And there were like 20 people sitting and he went alone. He was also a lawyer by training and he loved to argue, of course. So they said, why should we not prosecute you for breaking the rule? And he said, because of your rule, tens of thousands of Indians are suffering. The waiting list for my product is 10 years. There is a black market out there on pricing. He said, your rule is wrong. And he said, my forefathers have gone to jail fighting for independence. If I have to go to jail fighting for this, I will go to jail. And the MRTP report was what Mr. Bajaj is saying is right. And let him produce what he wants. And that went into dismantling partly the license Raj. So a lot of this comes from that history. But we must also recognize that times change. And today, for example, I find any feedback, even criticism on issues that are not appropriate, you can go and talk to people in the government and say it. But you can't go and stand on your balcony and announce it. They don't like that. But you give them constructive criticism, you give them possible solutions. 8 times out of 10, it is taken well.
Yeah. Yeah, Pawan. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. This is Pawan from Thermax. So, I see, of course, Bajaj has, of course, a household name, so much success in the last several decades. So my question is that now there is so much change which we expect in the next 2 or 3 decades. The conventional businesses are changing. There are so many new stuff coming on, in terms of energy environment is changing. We are transitioning to a key carbon kind of society or industry. So many things are happening. So what next for Bajaj is how do you see the next 10 or 20 years panning out for such a established and you have been focused in your approach in terms of not too much of a diversification, but whatever you have done, you have been extremely successful.
So, firstly, in the last couple of years, from loans to insurance, we have now moved into asset management as well. We launched our mutual fund business 2.5 years ago. We launched our alternates business with the real estate fund, private equity fund next year. And to us, in the next 3 to 4 years, the single biggest change is going to be driven by AI. And we started being very early adopters. We saw the power of this. In November 22, I think ChatGPT came out. By Feb, our top 200 leaders had done courses on AI. By April 22, Microsoft had created 100 instances for enterprise for ChatGPT before it became Copilot for them. We were one of the 100 global customers that got access to it. By January, this was, as I said, 23 April. By January 24, Microsoft had set up their first enterprise compute for AI in India on their India servers. We were their first customers. We believe that for our industry, AI is going to dramatically change things. Today, most of our marketing is digital. 85% of our content is already AI generated. We still have a pair of human eyes doing a final check because AI can hallucinate. It has got much better, but it can hallucinate. 30% of our customer service calls are today being handled by AI. On one product line, for customers that have expressed interest in a personal loan, in the last year, about 500 crores of personal loan are being disbursed by an AI voice that will introduce itself to you as an AI voice, speak based on how you're speaking, speak in Hindi, English or English. By middle of next year, it will speak in 12 languages and sell you your loan, negotiate the terms with you. Until a couple of months ago, there was a human closing the loan. Now we are even experimenting with it closing the loan with the customer. We think in the next 5 years, there is a very good chance there may not be for our kind of industry anything called operations or service, because agents and agentic will take it over. Today already, a number of our processes are agentic run, which are scores of agents doing individual, or these are agents algos doing individual tasks. So for us, this is the single biggest, I would say, multi-decade change. And because as a business, we don't produce anything physical, it is going to drive massive productivity improvement. It is going to create tremendous value addition for customers. It will take away a bunch of basic jobs, but it will create the next set of jobs. See, for example, 5 years ago, there was nothing called influencers. Today, how many influencers are there? So the digital world also creates new opportunities. When the first car came out, people thought, what will happen to everybody that makes house carriages? But the danger, there is a danger or a challenge right now. The speed of change is very fast with AI. So models that we are building 6 months ago are already no longer relevant. We are building new ones. And we work with some very senior global companies. I spent 45 minutes with my team with Satya Nadella yesterday, day before yesterday in Delhi. And Microsoft is a very large partner with us. We do the same with Amazon, with AWS. We do the same with Salesforce. We have a few of these large partners we work with. So to me, the next 3-4 years, it is that. From a longer term point of view, so when you say 20 years, no, I don't have a 20-year plan. But what we did this year is we took the government's Viksit Bharat document. It has 5 sections and it talks about what the dream for India is over the next 22 years. And we broke down that into lines which we think could be interesting for us to get involved in as a financial services company. So the entire technology evolution, the entire focus on green energy transition. Today we are one of the largest financiers of the small solar packs for homes in the country. We never did that earlier. What that does is it helps us build a close relationship with the rural customer. We can then offer them the next set of 5 products as well. So that is the document that we are taking inspiration from. Of course, it's not the only thing to think about what could be long term into the future.
Preet, yeah.
Yeah, Singh. I'm Harpreet from Godrej. Very simple question. Say, Hamara Bajaj was part of our life when we all grew up, and I don't know how you look at it, but we look at Bajaj as very close to us because of the sheer Hamara Bajaj. So when we look at next 75 years, Azadi ke next 75 years context, how do you look at country? I mean, you've answered partly in the previous question, but how do you look at country and Hamara Bajaj becoming more Hamara Bajaj?
You pass it back to Mohan. Yeah.
So as I mentioned in the beginning, one of our goals is in the next 10 years to, at least from a financial services point of view, to be present in every Indian household. Today, between insurance and our lending business, we cater to about 160 million Indians. We would like to at least double that in the next 10 years, if not more. We think as India is growing, the need for financial services is going to be very significant. But as we have seen, most of the innovation in the last 100 years is led from the West. It is led with the developed part of the world as the battleground for innovation. When you look at healthcare, it is led with the white Caucasian male as the target based on which medicines are made or treatments are made. China is one country which, because of its size, both economic size and people volume, has created its own models as relevant for its population. It's a different ethnicity. We believe India has that same opportunity. Partly India has demonstrated it through the India digital stack. Our payments today on UPI have negated the need for MasterCard and Visa. And it's free. Today at close to 17-18 billion payment transactions every month, we are not only bigger than the US, than China, than Europe, we are bigger than all 3 of them put together. And there is significant such change happening in a variety of areas that the digital world is leading. Look at our mobile costs, lowest in the world. Okay, you may say that everywhere I see 5G, I don't actually get 5G. You know, nothing is perfect in life. But see how dramatically it has changed business, small business. You today go to the Haath Gadi wala and you're buying 3 bananas and he gives you a QR code to pay. The illiterate guy is using a QR code, getting payment, money going straight into his bank account, building a credit score for himself for his future. So things are changing dramatically, but Hamara Bajaj, Hamara India will be building India in our manner. And not out of any kind of arrogance, because everybody is not the same. We don't have to follow the West. What is good, we must pick up. Most of us have studied in the West. But we have the brains to do what is right for our kind of fellow Indian as well.
Mohan, yeah.
My name is Mohan Raj. I am from TVS. This is one opportunity question because it is our grand challenge project, and you are also into health care insurance. What policies in India, from your point of view, will take us medical care to all the population? Maybe I'm just connecting it with your earlier answer of China model. So what model may take us to healthcare to all the Indian population.
So maybe Naushad actually may be in a better position to talk about
On healthcare.
on health and changes happening. But I was pleasantly surprised to read in one of the last issues of Forbes India the cover story on longevity, and people like Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw and many others are doing a lot of work on longevity in India. And a bunch of startups are doing work in this area. I was just talking to somebody in Europe doing some work, just talking today, doing some work on Alzheimer's. And they want to connect with people in India because as people are getting older, you have to make sure that not only your physical health is okay, but your mental health also is okay. Because otherwise, what's the point of living longer? So these are still early days, and there's a lot to be done. Starting with traffic, because stress is high, you're not going to survive too long. With the quality of our air, which is terrible. A lot of basic things as citizens we have to try and improve first, while we also work on the more advanced scum.
Lokesh?
My name is Luklesh. I work for Godrej Group. So my question was, we heard the auto business became big, and then you took up the challenge to took it to exports from 8,000 to 6 lakh, and then it's doing as such. You build a business from start, not from start with some hit start, and the financial business is now the good weather for the stock market firm looking at the Dutch FinSec. My question was, are there plans to take it to abroad to all the countries and not just India, or are you waiting on a lighter side? Are you waiting for your next generation to come in and have the same fun in the corridors like your father had with you, pushing him next 10 countries more and 20 countries more?
It's a very
Good idea.
It's a very interesting question.
Siddhant, that's a really good idea.
Siddhant has come.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting question. And the next generation is not only about my kids, it's about the next generation of our employees who are in their 30s now. So, in the last few years, we've looked at whether we should go international, if we get the necessary regulatory approvals, whether we should go into Southeast Asia. We see a lot of opportunity. But we have grown in the last 15 years CAGR at 35% in India. We are still growing at 25% CAGR, and we think we can continue to grow around 20-22% for the next 5-10 years. So when we look at the opportunity overseas and we put it on an Excel sheet, even when we look at it 10 years down the line, it doesn't move the needle. And we have to keep in mind, we are in very heavily regulated businesses, which in most cases end up being quite domestic. That's why even in India, if you'll see, foreign banks are restricted. Insurance, if you see, even though all the foreign companies keep it, it's the Indian promoters that are running the insurance companies well. So we are conscious of that. We are also conscious of the fact that the opportunity is there. And it's interesting, just last week I was talking to some of our senior leaders saying that, from our mid-30s, we are now in our mid-50s. And over the next few years, across our companies, we've already started the process of the next generation CEOs who are in their 40s, who will take over. Which means we have some free time. We will be the ones who will be mentoring them. We will hopefully provide the guidance of the North Star, prevent them from making terrible big mistakes, but otherwise let them build business with high level of empowerment. But it could be that for us in the next 5-10 years, we seed the next set of opportunities for the next generation of our employees, next generation of the family. Who knows?
So last question to Ranja.
This is how we become predictable, because you asked this to earlier on. Essentially, it's about how do successful leaders learn themselves. So one question is like, what are your reading habits? But larger, how do you just personally stay up to date? So it could be combination of both.
Yeah. I'm sure for different leaders, it's different. What has worked for me and for my team, one is we push ourselves to reading, and I'll talk about that also, because there is so much knowledge out there. But if you're going to stay cocooned in what you believe in from your past experience, you're going to lose the race going forward. So you have to force yourself to read, hopefully enjoy stuff that you read. Second is, I see that I learn from everybody around me. But you must have the humility to accept that you can learn from people, whether you're youngsters, whether older people, from everyone. Third, what I've always practiced and found very useful is in a meeting, I spend most of my time listening. Because if as the leader you start speaking first, our culture is very open. We openly argue, fight and stuff. But gradually, the youngsters will not want to open their mouth. So you must encourage people to speak. You must first learn to listen. We also encourage through the various projects we run in the company for people to take small risks early. Because we've always believed that if you don't push the boundaries of what is ordinary, you will never achieve the extraordinary. You will always play safe. And in large companies especially, for most people, they would rather play safe than stick their neck out. So how do you create a culture where people know it's okay to fail, but fail early? And otherwise, we are here to make sure that you don't fail big and destroy the company. So failure, but building that culture, and we are now 150,000 people. And we are very aware of the fact that as we get bigger, we will get more bureaucratic. That openness culture could go away. And we routinely do reviews, we do surveys. We just did a survey with 20,000 employees across the country 8 or 9 months ago and said, what is not working? And they were very open and transparent. They told us already things were becoming bureaucratic. Their bosses were just pushing hard on numbers and not on development. And we actually started cutting layers of management because we realized that as we grew, because we were growing 35% CAGR in 15 years, we kept adding, never kept subtracting. So doing that periodically is important as well. So I think it's a combination of these factors.
And reading habits?
Yeah. I was smiling because you reinforced so many messages from
Yeah.
your talk.
Correct.
But books you've read recently, any.
Yeah. So my reading or listening is divided into three parts. Every day, I read other than skim through our headlines, but the FT, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. Some days you can read more, some days you can read less, but those three I would go through. Also the BBC World podcast every morning is on when I drive to work, so you get to know global headlines over there. Magazines which I read regularly would be The Economist and The Time. I would love to also spend time reading The Atlantic, maybe The New Yorker. I subscribe to them, but I end up forgetting about it most of the time because of everything else. Podcasts, I end up sharing a bunch of them on health because that interests me. So you have Huberman, you have this guy Drew Purohit, Indian-American guy, you got Dr. Mark Hyman. So few of them, they get good speakers, they talk more broadly. And that I find interesting. Reading books, I'm currently reading one called Genesis. It's on AI, written by Henry Kissinger, the last book that he wrote, and Eric Schmidt. And I'll always have one on Audible. So actually the Genesis one is on Audible right now. And I've just started reading a book called How Not to Age. It's a great book actually, very simply written on simple things that you can do in your life to delay aging. All around nutrition, managing your health, not anything fancy and stuff, and not taking Ozempic and doing crash diets and stuff like that. I enjoy reading biographies because I enjoy reading about people that have done stuff. And then I don't read the typical management books. I find them boring. They just recycle the same stuff again and again. But I pick up stuff that's very random to read. And sometimes it's terrible, so you have to keep the book away. But sometimes it opens your mind up. Like I'll give you an example, and this is not reading, but 10, 12 years ago in Davos at the World Economic Forum, I attended this session by a company called Electronics Arts, one of the largest video game makers. And the lady who was presenting, she talked about how they were trying to, so with gaming, one, they realized that a lot of children who had attention deficit disorder, ADD, when they used to play the games, their attention used to be very good. And how they brought that into teaching, and these students became much better teachers. She then said, we are now talking to corporates to take gaming into training. And I came back, talked to my team. We found a startup in India that was doing that. And our insurance products become very complex. And, we have 100,000 agents. How do you make sure that the agent understands all the product well enough to explain to the customer? So we converted them into simple games, which they could do on their phones. And the tests were also converted like a game at the end. So you pick up random stuff like this from a completely different topic, which become very relevant to what you do. So there is a bit of randomness to my reading habits as well.
Great. Sanjeev, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for being with us. And I think we can continue chatting a little bit over a drink. But thank you really for joining us this evening, and thank you for your responses to our questions. Thank you for agreeing to do this so readily. Thanks.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me here. Thank you.